Hello, I'm Marcus Railton, and welcome back to the second series of the ScotsCare podcast. ScotsCare is the only charity dedicated to helping disadvantaged Scots in London through a range of support, including financial grants, advocacy, counselling and sheltered housing for older Scots, job coaching, social events, befriending and support for children and families. The charity's been running for 400 years to help break the cycle of poverty experienced by some Scots. In the new series, I'll be chatting with guests from all walks of life, from celebrities and authors, athletes and actors, business entrepreneurs to academics, all with one thing in common: Scots heritage. And they enjoy a good blether. Coming up in the second series of the ScotsCare podcast, we have the best-selling author, the Hebridean baker, star of London Kills and the Bay, Sharon Small, menopause expert, Ruth Devlin, and the co-founder of the Scottish Business Network, Russell Dalgleish, amongst a host of other great guests. But to kick off the first episode, I'm joined by former international footballer, commentator, writer, DJ, Pat Nevin. I caught up with Pat from his home in the Scottish borders near Berwick-upon-Tweed. It'd been a full-on week for him, but he was still in great form. We spoke about his son's autism and how much the family struggled in the early years due to the lack of information available. Simon even pops in for a brief chat during the podcast. Pat spoke about his early years, growing up in Glasgow, and how the city has changed hugely. We covered his football career, from Clyde to Chelsea, and his Scotland days, all in Pat's typical laconic style. Pat has written 2 books so far, both bestsellers. We chatted about them, when the next one would be out, and the possibility of a Pat Nevin novel. So here we go, kicking off the second series of the ScotsCare podcast with Pat Nevin.
ScotsCare, the charity helping to break the cycle of poverty some Scots find in London.
Hi Pat, thanks for doing this.
Absolute pleasure, Marcus. You caught me after doing one of the busiest weeks I've had in a long time. So,
have you been? Did you say to me was it this week you were in Spain, or was it last week you were in Spain?
Yeah, so I was Guernsey, then Spain, then I did 3 different games in Scotland. At that time I was also making a pick of the week for Radio 4 as I was doing it. So there's a million jobs all going on at one time. I was juggling them all at the same time.
So I thought Spain was a holiday when you said to me you were off to Spain, so you were working.
Yeah, well, if you can call Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich working, yeah, I was working.
Do you know what? My wife and I, we went to Barcelona in January, and it was lovely. And we were sitting on the beachfront, and I was thinking, this is the worst the weather gets here. And people were rollerblading up and down the beachfront and playing volleyball and doing, and the weather here had been so miserable. And it's the cultural difference. It's just a million miles from Scotland or even where I live outside London now. It was wonderful.
You're absolutely right. Fun. It happens sometimes. We've had a terrible winter. Someone said to me, a local farmer said, we're not having spring this year. We're just going from winter straight to summer. I'm thinking, yeah, I get that. Whereas, I was in Barcelona 3 weeks ago and it just feels so relaxed. And you think, why do we not do that? Why don't we not sit outside and have cups of coffee or tea and a glass of wine? I tell you what, because you get hypothermia most of the time. It's simple as that.
Yeah.
But having said that, London's is actually that much better than Scotland for that sort of weather. You can do it far more frequently in London than you can do in Scotland.
Yeah, where I am, I was when I moved down to London, I was at ITN as a journalist, and then as I've had kids, we've kind of got further out and further out. So I'm in Surrey now, but sometimes it's too hot, and we've got kind of 3-story house, and then concrete tiles in the roof, and the bedroom is just too hot in the summer. So it's a nice problem to have, isn't it? But we seem to have done that as well here. It's hot today. It's 18 or 19 degrees, but last week I had the heating on, and this week I'm complaining about the heat. So it's I
never complain about the heat. I never ever complain about the heat. It can be anything. As soon as it gets to 70s and 80s and old money, I'm out running, and I love the kind of, even 90. I love running in that. So I never complain about heat.
Have you ever played in the Middle East?
Yeah. The kind of weirdest places I played, certainly Thailand, Hong Kong, places like that I find really incredibly difficult because it's a different type of heat. Obviously, you've got it's a kind of wet heat as it were. But I remember I played one game and I was at Chelsea and we had some time off. It was a deep freeze in England, so we couldn't get any games played. So we went to the Middle East to play again, and that game was it was extraordinary. And the most extraordinary thing about it, and I'll tell you the edited version, was we went out to start the game and we couldn't start, even though there was 30,000 fans in, and the referee was there, and the opposition team were there. We couldn't start, and it was like a bit weird, and we didn't know what was going on. It's a foreign country, Middle East, etc. Anyway, after about 45 minutes, when most of the fans did some praying and things like that at various points, eventually we were allowed to start because the guest of honour had arrived. We didn't know that was the problem. The guest of honour, yeah. And the problem was, had that guest of honour been Nelson Mandela, I'd have been really impressed by that. That'd been okay. But it wasn't. We were playing against Iraq in Baghdad and some bloke called Saddam Hussein.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So playing in that heat, we had 45 minutes to wait with all the fans in. We met Saddam afterwards just to get handshakes and all the rest of it. But it was the weirdest thing because we couldn't warm up because, as you were alluding to, it's damn hot.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy hot. Well, I worked out in Qatar and I worked out in Saudi, and apart from the heat, you just got to get used to the cultural differences as well, where things move slower. We're all kind of rushing about like ants here, but you just got to. When we were there, we'd ask somebody to do something, and it would take 45 minutes to an hour to get anything done. And then after you're there for a wee bit of time, you kind of realize why, because you can't run about like a nutcase there. You drop into a puddle,
Yeah, I have to say, I was out in Qatar for the World Cup, and I went running every day, and it really is incredible. People just look at you there as, why are you running? Why are you not inside in an air-conditioned gym running? And I was running along the kind of roads and things like that, and there's just nobody else. Yeah, wherever, most places you go in the world, if you go for a run or a jog, there's some other people doing it, right?
Yeah.
Nah, not Qatar. No.
But you know what, Pat? In all seriousness, it's a big problem for them. That's when I was out there. We were working for a company, and it was part of a kind of corporate social responsibility thing, because 25% of Qataris have got diabetes 2, because the diet's not great and the heat's so bad, and they just don't move. And so they're trying to put all this infrastructure along, probably where you were running, along the front there, to try and get people to exercise a bit more. It's a big problem for them.
Yeah, and I can see that and I can understand that. But I suppose wherever you go, there are problems, certainly back in the UK, sort of obesity problems in America as well. Just getting the right types of food, because the right types of food is sometimes really expensive. It's cheaper fast foods, so you've got all sorts of problems everywhere. So it's about A, trying to educate yourself, and B, whatever regime stroke government you're working under, to try and do the best to help that education of people. So that's a big part of all societies.
Yeah, you're quite right. But let's go back to the beginning. You and I were both Glaswegians. You were born in the East End, and your father was a crane driver. Your mum was a homemaker. Glasgow, I don't go back to Glasgow much these days, because I went back when my parents were alive, and then my dad died during COVID, and I kind of lost any reason now to go home, as it would be. So, but the last time I was home, it was massively changed. It was massively multicultural and cosmopolitan, but it wasn't like that when you were growing up in the late 60s and 70s, was it?
Well, in my high school, there was only one. Well, my primary school, there was one boy of colour, and he turned out to be my best friend. He was a great goalkeeper, and you kind of, was weird when you look at it now and you go to Glasgow. I've been in Glasgow quite a lot in the last 3 or 4 weeks, oddly enough, and it does hit you. It absolutely hits you that culturally it's much, much wider now, and it is variety of nations. Lots of Polish people are from Eastern Europe, lots of Ukrainians currently at the moment as well. So there's a wide diversity of people, and Scotland is very welcoming. I think people generally, not everything, you can't be that general, but it is very welcoming of people coming in. And certainly that's a positive I see in our nation, because, Scots have travelled all around the world.
Yeah.
We like to be welcomed where we go, And I think that's one of the things that Scots have always understood. But it is culturally changing. It's massively different from it was. You just have to walk along, even the West End, up there. I went for something to eat the other day there, and it's very noticeably different. But generally, and I say that generally, it's incredibly welcoming. Marcus, the other thing we need to remember is, for people who don't know Glasgow that well, we have a different kind of outlook of when the Indian and Pakistani and Bangalore diaspora came in originally. We, as a city, fell madly in love with the food. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And every people talk about Scottish food. What is the base Scottish food? And from the outside, we'll think it's either haggis or boiled Mars bars or fried Mars bars. It's not. It's chicken tikka masala. It's kind of madras. It's all that. The Scots eat that just as much as just about anything else. So we've always been encouraging of different cultures coming in.
Oh, definitely. I think Glaswegian curry is one of the best curries I've ever tasted. And the just talking about the naan breads alone, they're just so different to any naan breads you would get anywhere else. And the last time I went to Glasgow, I was walking along the front and I was showing my kids Finnieston Crane. And it's just when I was reading about your dad being a crane driver, it made me think of this. And I came home and I bought a little oil painting about 20 centimetres by 20 centimetres of the Finnieston Crane. And my oldest lad, Noah, thought I was bonkers. He's going, Dad, it's an old crane. And I was like, oh, this is an iconic landmark. And I've got it up in my dining room now. And I love it. It's all dark and grey, and it just typifies what Glasgow was like growing up for me.
It's really hard to explain to people the importance of that area. As the heavy industry was dying down in the Clyde, I was about 15, 16, 17. I kind of get into photography, but I was using black and white photography at the time. We didn't have camera phones, folks. And that was one of the places I took a lot of photographs down there by the Clyde, is, all the derelict buildings and the cranes. And there was more than that left, not just the one Finnieston crane there. But you knew the industry was dying or just about dead. But there was such echoes. There was such sadness. And there were also such memories of what Glasgow had been. It had to change so quickly. And it's such an effect because a lot of the immigrants who come from Ireland or wherever to work there, including my great-grandparents. But then losing those interests, a lot of people left. Because you had to go find out, you had to go to the south, you had to go to London, you had to go elsewhere abroad. So it's kind of not just a big crane, it's what it says to us in the background.
Yes. Yeah, I like that you recognise that. I was born in Maryhill, and then we moved out to Clydebank, and the whole of Clydebank was about John Brown Shipyard. And every kid in my class, their dad was in the shipyard. And then, like you say, when we got a bit older, that shut down, and it killed Clydebank for a long time. Everybody was unemployed. It became an extremely poor town to live in.
ScotsCare, the charity helping to break the cycle of poverty some Scots find in London.
We talk about when you were growing up as a lad, you were a Celtic supporter. And like I said, I was born in Maryhill, so I was a Partick Thistle supporter. I remember Alan Ruff being in goals for them, because I always felt, and you'll understand this, when somebody says, who do you support? And you said Partick Thistle, it was always a wee bit of a safer option when you were a kid, wasn't it?
And the next question is usually, no, but who do you really support? you know that's true, don't you? Everyone always says, nah, but who do you really support? Seen as a cop-out, or B, just trying not to get into trouble in case you're talking to the wrong people. But it was kind of a weird thing in Glasgow. I mean, I ended up playing for Clyde, which is obviously another small team in Glasgow as well. But the Celtic Rangers thing was absolutely gigantic. It was huge. It was a massive part of it. I grew up following Celtic as a kid. All my family did as well. I mean, the slight giveaway is many years later. I signed for Celtic as a kid. It's S form, etc. They let me go, and I was playing in a boys' club game for Gatcross United one day, And I was a centre forward when I was 17, and I was doing my degree, and wasn't interested in becoming a professional footballer. But I scored 4 goals in this cup final, and I was walking off, and the Glasgow Rangers scout came walking up towards me. And these were in the bad old days where there were certain people who weren't signed for Glasgow Rangers at the time.
Of course, yes.
And he walked up to me and goes, "Hello, my name is," and I went, "Yep, my name is Patrick Kevin Francis Michael Nevin. Goodbye." And anyone who doesn't understand that, the concept is they didn't sign Catholics. And with a name like that, with all those kind of very Catholics in their names, he couldn't sign me anyway.
No, I know.
Or not. So
was it Maurice Johnson? Was he the first Catholic that was signed for Rangers?
Allegedly, yeah. Although it's if you want to delve into the history a little bit more, John Spencer had quietly before that been signed on, but that's kind of there's question marks over that. But the most obvious and clear signing. But I mean, that's gone now. I have to say, Maurice and I, we knew each other. We were exactly the same age. We played against each other and in the same team, under 11. And we couldn't be more different types of people. You're just totally opposite types of people. What your interests were. He might have been going out to the nightclubs while I was going down to the ICA in London. It's like slightly different places that we hung out when we were playing in London. But I always admired that he had the guts, the bravery, the stupidity to actually go and do that, to sign for Rangers. Now, lots of Celtic fans will not feel that way, but it didn't. It started to break down the worst taboo in Scotland. And we talk about various difficulties we have, but the religious divide in Scotland, certainly the west of Scotland, is a thing that disappoints me most about my entire country. If I'm hands up, honest about it, I can't be bothered with it. I have no time for it. So when I was growing up, that was all around, but my family never partook in it. We just supported our football team. We never had anything got to do with bigotry or inequality. We just didn't do that. And it's the one thing that if I could fast forward and make that better quicker, I would do that now.
Yeah. Well, for anyone who doesn't know, we're talking about Maurice Johnson, who played for Rangers first and then signed for Celtic. No, played for Celtic and then, played for Celtic, then played for Rangers, which, at the time was seismic, wasn't it? Yeah. I
was playing for Scotland once. So his career path, I think, was Partick Thistle on to Watford, then back to Celtic, then he eventually goes to Rangers, right? So I was driving one day, and I was in Scottish border, and I was driving down towards Chester where I was living. I was driving a van that actually had some furniture in the back to take down back to Chester. And as I was driving along, the BBC had this news report, BBC in English BBC, as it were, UK BBC. It says, "Maurice Johnson has just signed for Glasgow Rangers." And I thought, you idiots, because he'd been noted he was about to re-sign for Celtic that day and had been pictured with a Celtic strip on the day before. And I thought, the abuse the BBC are going to get for getting that one wrong. Imagine getting Celtic and Rangers mixed up. Half an hour later, a Scottish journalist came on and said, "Maurice Johnson has signed for Rangers." I honestly nearly wrapped my van round a tree. What? And sometime later, we were in the Scotland squad together. And we were going to Hampden for a match. And nobody was sitting beside Mojo. And I went and sat beside him and just give him a wee bit of backup because he's just signed for Rangers. And honestly, what he was getting put through by both sets of fans was extraordinary. He was public enemy number one in the country. And in fact, not just this country, another country too, in Ireland, Northern Ireland as well. That wasn't going down very well. So it's phenomenal stories around Maurice. We ended up playing together at Everton. He came down and signed for Everton, and the stories followed him. But you can say that about a lot of players that we played.
Yeah, and I suppose the one thing that, if you could take anything that's positive about the criticism that he got, was thank God there was no social media back then, because that could have been horrific.
Yeah, it was bad enough as with death threats and stuff like that were allegedly coming from paramilitary organisations. So no laughing matter in many ways, and both sides of the divide, as I say. Social media, you'd Morris known Morris just would have ignored it anyway. He couldn't have cared. He's such an extreme character in those times and would do such extreme things. And it's kind of weird. I remember once, when we were at Everton and we were organising, the manager said we're going to go on a little sort of pre-season tour or different places, where we might go to. And anyway, it was decided we'd go to Northern Ireland, up, in the northwest coast of Northern Ireland. And everyone chatted away and said, yeah, it's a good idea. And there was a moment's silence. And then, I'll not use the expletives, but you've got to be effing joking, says Maurice Johnson. Still had death threats. I'm not going there.
I'll bet, yeah. Yeah, I think one of the other times where I've kind of felt emotionally challenged in football was, I think it was when Paul Gascoigne, was he playing for Rangers at the time in the Euro 96 tournament? And then he took the ball over Colin Hendry's head and scored for England. And I kind of that was phenomenally emotionally confusing for me as a fan, because, he's scoring for England at the same time as it was my Glasgow Rangers hero.
It's one of the things that does happen sometimes. We know, as players, we know we can do that. We can play one thing and against the other. I mean, I'd often play. I remember playing against Tony Cottee, and I was playing for Scotland against England, but we were roommates and played together at Everton. I mean,
really?
How weird is that? It's your roommates. It's just the weirdest thing. But we manage as football folk, when we play, we compartmentalise very, very well. But I think it is harder for fans, particularly if you have such huge characters and you're invested in one or two or three who are your kind of iconic characters, and it is a difficult thing. But you have to manage. You have to make a decision in your heart when your football fan sometimes tells you.
Yeah.
When I had that even playing as well. I can remember once playing for Everton, and the Chelsea fans I'd been player of the year a couple of times at Chelsea, and I got sold to Everton. That was a bigger club back in those days, Everton. And I thought to myself, but what happens when I play against Chelsea? The fans I love them so much. They are so kind to me. And I thought to myself, the worst thing that could happen is if I get through 1-1, goal at the shed end.
Yeah.
Could I do it? Could I actually do it? They'd be so kind. And I'm hopefully someone who's got a bit of a heart and a bit of a soul. Yes, I got a 1-1 in that first game down at Stamford Bridge at the shed end, and being a soulless git that I actually am, I rounded the goalkeeper David Best and slid it into the net. And it was the weirdest thing. We have these things in football, don't we, where you're completely conflicted.
Yes.
But sometimes your heart tells you, and sometimes your head tells you what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, and you're a professional. You're paid to do a job, and I think what I read, I think it's quite well documented, and there's lots of articles that said about you when Chelsea first came calling, you turned them down because, as you said just earlier, there you were doing a degree. Now, when I read that in 2 or 3 places, and I thought that what a decision to make, Pat. Because were your parents involved at that at 17, or it seems to demand a massive amount of maturity to not just sack off the university.
Oh, my dad thought it was stupid, but my mum thought it was mature. Actually, the book I wrote a book 4 years ago called The Accidental Footballer, which actually deals completely with that. And it became such a complex thing that, the intro of the book is about that. It's about the fact that, how you can find this dichotomy that you can absolutely love playing football, which I adored and loved doing, but I don't necessarily want to be a professional footballer, and I didn't particularly. In fact, I often say I tried really hard not to be a footballer and failed miserably at that, which is a kind of odd way to take it. But the reason is I love playing. I didn't like all the other sides of it. No interest in fame, no interest in all that side of it. Couldn't care less, never have. But I wanted to do the degree, finish that, knew that anything could go wrong in a football career if you did that. And I was having a good time in Glasgow. I was a student. And then shortly after that, Craig Brown, the Clyde manager, watched me playing, saw me playing and said, come and play with us. And I said, I can't, I'm doing a degree. And he went, well, we're only part-time, it won't affect your degree. We can give you 30 quid a week. And I said, where's the pen? because I hadn't realised you could kind of do the both of them at the same time. But yeah, I turned down Chelsea for a year because, I wanted to finish the studies. I was very, very happy in Glasgow. Didn't have massive interest in having that as a job, as a professional career. But after a year, for very complicated reasons, I wanted to go and play in the World Youth Championships with Scotland. As I tried not to be a footballer, weird things kept on happening. Like I get Divisional Player of the Year at Clyde, we'd win the league. I went with the Scotland under-18s to the Euros, European Youth Championships, and not only did we win them, I get Player of the Tournament. And I'm thinking, this plan's not working. So it was a very, very weird thing, but it made sense to me at the time because all my family had all gone into sort of higher education. So that was the norm for me and my family, 6 siblings. That's what we do. So football would be a weird sort of left turn for us. So from the outside, it looks strange. And hopefully I've saved in sort of the various things I've written, particularly in the last couple of books I've written. It does make sense through a rather skewed vision, it has to be said.
Yeah, I think in the accidental footballer, like you say, you talk about that a lot. And what I wondered was how you straddled the two camps, because you're a fan of Joy Division and the Smiths, and you like art and you like photography, and then in the world of football, it seems quite different. I worked for a big football organization for a while, and it was very slightly misogynistic, lots of machismo, and I wondered if you ever felt socially isolated when you were in the kind of football world, or kind of missed the cultural enrichment of your other world.
But why miss it? You can still live it. It's only your work. A few hours a day. Yeah, you can do your work. I mean, I found them an interesting group as well. There's banter, there's wind-ups, there's people that say misogynistic things or say, you read books, you must be gay, kind of thing. You get all that garbage back then. I was kind of maybe had a bit of confidence about my own attitude and thinking, well, you can call me gay if you like. I don't happen to be gay, but I don't even find it a particularly offensive thing to say. So what? Okay, that's probably quite ahead of its time. I'll grant you that. But my attitude was, no, I'm kind of comfortable who I am, comfortable in my own skin. I've got my own interests, my own friends. And I think the important thing is, you be yourself. And if you're not yourself and you try and fit in too much with everyone else, if people are going to try and bully you, they can spot that a mile away. They can see that. So the important thing is to try and be yourself. But I understand and very much underline this. It's not always easy. It isn't. For a lot of people, it's not always easy. It happened to be very easy for me because I was comfortable with being an outsider. Very comfortable. I kind of liked my interest and wasn't going to be pushed. I came from a family that, had their own very strong ethical outlooks and views. And I could go into deep language about it, but let's forget that. Let's just say the phrase my dad would say to me if you were thinking of doing something just because other people would do it, which is, so if he jumped in the Clyde, would you do that as well? And that's it. You know that phrase.
Yeah.
It's a classic phrase of be yourself. Learn what you have to learn. Be educated if you can possibly be educated. And that's what I had. I didn't have the silver spoon in the mouth when I was growing up in East End of Glasgow. I had better than that. Now the golden spoon of 2 fabulous parents, now a lovely family. And that gives you the strength and confidence to be yourself.
Children and families are ScotsCare's top priorities. They're where most of our help goes. ScotsCare offers financial grants, counselling, respite holidays, and days out to the likes of London Zoo and Winter Wonderland. We see helping families with tailored support as key to improving the lives of Scots in London.
And when you lived in London, you didn't live the kind of the Charlie Nicholas, Maurice Johnston lifestyle, but you've always, even though you've been, you're a DJ, you're a commentator, you're a football player, even then, when you didn't live your private life in public, was that the same, just going back to who you are, or was it a concerted effort to say, I'm going to separate this bit off my wife and kids and keep that private?
Great question. It's actually both. It's who I was. I didn't really fancy it. You know, now and again, you'd find yourself in a situation, I mean, very rarely in a place where we have a fancy nightclub, paparazzi, all that sort of stuff. I found it boring. I wasn't interested. I just happened to, I prefer to be down at the Opera House, the ballet, or go to see a gig, or you go to see a movie, or go to see a talk by a filmmaker. You know, that's what I'd rather do. You know, so that's, you follow your interests. Now, does that make me completely unusual for a footballer? To some degree, yeah. But how many people have got those interests in the general population? It's probably quite not a small percent, but it's not the majority. So I think football people are kind of like a kind of normal cross-section of society. You get all different interests within it. So yeah, I would steer clear of things that I knew were dangerous. Now, if you worked in the media, which you have, you know, you understand that there's an unwritten deal somewhere there. If you go and play that media game and you're advertising things and you're turning up in the red card and you're showing who you are, right? In those days, fine, but you're now part of us.
Yeah.
And if you misstep, you're going to get it. And particularly the red tops at the time. I knew that. I understand that. I understood that. So I wouldn't have taken that chance. I thought, no, perfectly normal life, quiet life, things that have interest in. And but it wasn't always quiet. You got mad gigs, go to the Clash or whatever. You know, it's not all quiet. But you understand there is an invisible line there where if you go and live this celebrity lifestyle, I mean, you can still work in the media and I worked in television and radio, and, you know, still do and write for newspapers. But that's not celebrity life, is it? That's doing a job.
Yeah.
When you do that job and then you try to sell yourself in other ways, that certainly at that time was seen as celebrity lifestyle. Okay, you belong to us and you'll pay the price if you step out of line.
And in both of your books that you've written recently over the last few years, you know, I suppose they're memoirs, but they don't really read like memoirs in a way, because I in your second one, I got quite stressed reading it, because, you know, you're talking about your time at Motherwell and towards the end of your career in your kind of mid to late 30s. And it reads like a roller coaster in parts. It reads like a novel in parts. I was kind of immersed in you as a character. And was that deliberate, or was that just the way it came out onto the paper?
Can I just say thank you to you for saying that? That's exactly what I was aiming for, precisely. I've read lots of memoirs before, some good, some bad, some indifferent. Football ones are, you know, don't really interest me greatly. I scored a goal at the back post. I don't care. And I don't think many people do. You know, you get through it, and what are you learning? I wanted it to be more character driven. I'm not the only character in it. The first book, my dad's probably the main character. Although my dog Shandy is a big character in it too. You know, which people, they're fun stories about the dog. But, you know, they're one of the great things about, if you're a great reader, which I always have been, is that you understand the importance of good characters. So characterization is important. So if you're playing football and you look around, there are damn good characters there to write about. You know, they are interesting. Gaza, who you mentioned, Big Duncan Ferguson, you know, yes. Some of the people around you, they are great characters. So, okay, take those characters, you know, you don't have to adapt them that much. You just see where they fit in, and it's a lovely thing to build. The second one, if you go talking purely stylistically, I knew what was happening in the whole story, because the whole idea was, I knew what was going to happen. It's a 3-part thing, it's 3 books. There's the third one still to come, and it's done in such a way that they couldn't be done as one book. It was too long anyway. But I always knew that this one, the middle one, the second one, would turn into what I hope would be almost a thriller at the end.
Yes.
What's going to happen? You know, you go, oh my God. Because I knew, plenty of people didn't know I'd played for Motherwell, you know, been chief executive. Can't remember what happened unless you happen to be a Motherwell fan. And people out with, you know, and it's a little bit of time ago as well. So it's gone faded in people's mind. So I wanted to bring that back in the kind of, there's jeopardy there. There's kind of, whoa, what's going to happen? So I'm sorry if it made you feel a bit upset, because it was meant to do that.
No, in a good way, because I felt you were, there's all the football, and then there is a glimpse into your private life. You're very honest, and you were honest about your son Simon and his autism, and the stress that put on the family, and the fact that these days we know so much more, and you can get a diagnosis for it. When did you get a diagnosis for Simon? Because you must have been going through hell in the early years, just wondering what the hell was going on.
A huge ignorance about it. And funnily enough, Simon's just arrived back in the house there, as we are chatting just now. And there was no knowledge. I mean, even the wording wasn't clear back in those days. And it's something that's hard to explain, that you're basically drowning in a sea of ignorance because you don't know what to do. You want to do the best for your child, but you have no idea what's wrong. You have no idea why it's happening. You have no idea if you're doing anything wrong. You try and get help, information, not help as in just information. I don't want anyone to, say, we'll take this problem from you. It's not that. It's because you know that's what you're going to have to live with the rest of your lives. But, information. So to do the right things by Simon. So that was an incredibly difficult time. I've never spoken about it in my life. I'm nearly 60 now. I am 60 now. And we'd never spoken about it. It's not because we were hiding it. It's because it's up to Simon to talk about it when he's ready. And it's only in the last couple of years he said, yeah, it's okay, talk about it. Can I tell you a wee story about it? Because there are stories in the book about Simon. The reason why they're there is, A, to explain, people who are in the public eye, sometimes you give them dog's abuse. Hey, they're human and they're living pains and difficulties too. And they're all the same, right? And it was to explain that to people. And it wasn't a get the violins out, woe is me kind of thing. The other thing to very much underline is what we could have done with was a wee bit of information, help, little tips here and there. Also, people saying you're not the only one, and we felt completely isolated, right? So writing this was to say, right, here's our bit of the story, how it went. You don't know what you're going to go through next, but hey, we got through it and we've come to some great places at the end of it. And some of the happiest moments of my life involve Simon. And, you have to stand back a wee bit sometimes and look at that. And I'll tell you one tiny, lovely little story, which is not in any of the books yet. The second book arrived, which is the one that Simon's in, Football and How to Survive It. And I'd say to him, does he mind if I write about him? And he said, yeah. Simon's now 33, by the way. Still living at home. So the book arrived, and it's, you can see me, that green one behind me there.
Yeah.
So it's arrived. And it's a lovely feeling you've written a book, especially if you've written it yourself and it's not ghosted. I write my own stuff. So I've sat at a table at breakfast. I said, well, Simon, the book's arrived. Would you like me to read part of it to you? Right? Yeah, all right. So I found a bit about Simon and sort of read through it. Bored, not interested. Doesn't care. Wants to get downstairs and listen to play the computer, right? So, fair enough. Good. Job done. Better forget it. I had to do again that night up in Glasgow. So I got in the car and drove up. My wife came back for work later. And there's Simon. How you doing? You going for a run? There's Simon now.
Who's this?
Oh, we're just doing this with my friend Marcus. And we're doing
Hello. Hi, Simon.
Nice to meet you, mate.
You too.
You do that, Simon. Take care. Looking cool. Hey, it's first time ever. So he came. I went out to do this game, and Simon, I phoned Annabelle, and I said, "Oh, I showed Simon a bit." He wasn't interested. She said, "He's not shut up about it since."
Really, that's lovely, isn't it?
Isn't it great? So he's doing well. Simon works. He's a driver. He drives special educational needs kids. He will always be with us. But he's done so much more than we would ever have believed himself capable of. So that's what I kind of wanted to share as much as anything else, that through the difficult and hard times, there are positives in it.
Yeah, I think it comes across, it comes across brilliantly in the book. It's light and shade, and and here's my one final question to you, Pat, or maybe it's more of a request, and it's kind of come out of everything that you wrote about your family life and you wrote about the time at Motherwell. Would you please write a novel because I would love to read a Pat Nevin football-based, it doesn't have to be a murder mystery, but, I think, if you hadn't used The Accidental Footballer as a name, that's just a brilliant title.
I know. Funnily enough, it's the one thing of all the stuff I put out. The cover art is not mine. The guy who did that was brilliant. And the title, The Accidental Footballer, wasn't mine. I wish it was, but it wasn't. That was the guy who looked at towards the editing, because I kind of tend to write too much. So I'd written 140,000 words for the first one. And I could tell you, so, and he said to me, look, you got to go into fiction. You got to do that. Just, it's a style that I think people would like. And he's a good editor, his editing, people don't understand it. He never wrote a word or cut anything. He just said, look, do you think needs a bit tightened? Or, that sort of stuff. What do you think about that? Is that a bit journalistic? So to be talked about at that level of intelligence and belief in your abilities as a writer was a great thing. But I tell you a wee story about that, because we're listening here. I wrote the first book, and I didn't tell anyone I was writing. I just wrote it and then gave it to this publisher, Monterey. And he said the lovely thing. He said, well, you can write, which this is just what you want to hear, right? And a few people looked at it before it came out. It was just about to come out. The day it was coming out, they took me out for a wee lunch down in London, down to a place off the Mall. And we're sitting chatting away. And he said, look, the people I've talked about and I'm going to review it have given it great reviews, and we think it's going to be a Sunday Times bestseller. Have you thought of writing another one? I went, yeah, here it is.
Brilliant.
USB. Yeah, there it is. Because I love that. The point being, I love writing. I absolutely love the creative process. So when I get the third one out of the way, which I'll kind of need to leave a wee while, because there's been two out in quick succession.
Yeah.
The third one, the style, the actual subject matter's totally different. So it needs a little bit of a break. After that, if I've survived, I'll life, never mind football. I definitely would love to do some novels.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. Pat, thank you so much for speaking to us today. You've been a joy, and I wish you the best of luck.
And to you too, Marcus, and everyone listening.
The Saltire Donor Club is our monthly giving club. Could you spare a monthly donation of any amount to help homeless and vulnerable Scots? Visit our website to give monthly and join the Saltire Donor Club. It couldn't be easier, and it will make a difference to those struggling in London.